Right. Welcome everyone to the Wellness and the Movement video series. This is a multi-part series that we've developed to focus on our wellness here in the domestic violence movement. So before we jump on in to introduce you to this video series, just wanted to take a moment to settle in, to take a breath. So if you want to join me, that's fine. If not, there's no forced wellness in these videos or ever with us. But we just thought if you wanted to, could take a breath to kind of start on that path of wellness to really bring us into the moment. So if you want to, go ahead and take a deep breath in. Hold it for a moment. Take a deep breath out. Let's just do that 2 more times. Take a deep breath in. And out. And 1 more. Breathing in. And out. Right. All right, thanks for doing that with us to start us off. And if you felt like you didn't want to, that's perfectly fine too. All right, we're gonna move into our video a little bit more here, and we're going to introduce ourselves, starting with Dr. Josie Serrata.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Serrata. I am honored to be here with you all and work with Jen and Molly on this wonderful project. I am a clinical and community psychologist by training. I have a group practice here in Austin, Texas, called Prickly Pear Therapy and Training. And this is our jam. We do this type of work on a daily basis. We specifically serve the Latinx community here in Austin and in Texas around mental health services. But then we also do organizational development, organizational consulting, and we're excited to share some of our knowledge with you all during this series. Molly, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Molly Thibodeau. Been in the movement for over 20 years and cumulatively with TCFV in various roles for over 10 years since 2007. And most recently, I serve on the TCFV policy team that supports family violence programs, on agency policies and best practices with many different programming focus areas. And we look forward to being on this wellness journey with all of you and learning from each other and supporting each other. So thank y'all for being here. And with that, I'll pass it to Jen.
Hey everyone, glad that you're here with us in this video. I'm Jen Mudge. I work with Molly Thibodeau on the policy team at TCFV. Like she said, focusing on agency policies and also statewide and federal legislation that affects survivors. And one of my focus areas is also mental health and wellness for the survivors that you all are working with to help support you all as you support them, and also for our own wellness in this movement, wellness of advocates, the wellness of our organizations. And that led us to these videos and some other resources that we'll be developing. But my background is in advocacy, working at a dual domestic violence and sexual assault program in various roles there, and also have a background in social work and spent some time briefly working as a counselor. But I'm very happy to be here with Josie and Molly today, and happy that you're watching along with us. All right, so I will pass it to Molly to talk a little bit more about what TCFV does.
Yeah. So many of you might already know, but we wanted to give an overview of what TCFV is and what we do. And so TCFV is the statewide domestic violence coalition in Texas, comprised of family violence service providers and allied professionals working to promote safe and healthy relationships by supporting service providers, facilitating strategic prevention efforts, and creating opportunities for freedom from family violence. TCFB is a membership-based organization made strong by the 100 family violence programs and over 1,000 individual members, comprised of professionals from supportive organizations and businesses, survivors of family violence, and other concerned citizens who stand with us in our mission. And so we've been doing this since 1978 is when we organized. And so our mission is to support safe and healthy relationships by supporting service providers, facilitating strategic prevention efforts, and creating opportunities for freedom from domestic violence. And so with a statewide reach and direct local impact, TCFB shapes public policy, equips service providers with essential tools, and initiates strategic prevention efforts. And so as you see here, we have 3 different teams focused on one on policy, prevention, and also support to service providers. So if you're not familiar with TCFB, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you more about what we do and how we can support you and your program and your advocacy. And so with that, I'll pass it back.
Hi, yes, like I mentioned earlier, we're Prickly Pear Therapy and Training. I, along with my colleague, Dr. Hurtado, established Prickly Pear in part because of previous experiences with organizational trauma and high stress, and working with in organizations that do the type of work that we do, right? And we really wanted to spend some time developing an organization that actively has the mission of trauma-informed care and wellness at the center of all that we do. So we do actively do this within our own org structure, but then also we saw the need to provide support to other organizations, support leadership and coaching. We provide collective care support, which you'll know more about by the end of these training videos. But we really focus on providing multicultural, trauma-informed mental health care, not only to the community here in Texas, but also to organizational leaders, healers that are doing their own wonderful work in the community. So we're happy to be here in partnership with TCFB in this training video series.
Thanks, Josie and Molly. So I think I'll put it back to you, Josie, just to talk us through the different components of the video series.
Yeah, so we're excited to have 6 different components with this video series, 5 of which are mini videos. This is our first one we're launching. Yay, our introductory video that you're watching now. This is where we'll give some kind of background into some research that was done that led into why we're developing this series. Then we'll go into different parts. We thought that we would break these down into mini videos, as we know how it is to do these trainings ourselves and watch these videos ourselves. And we thought it would be better to kind of break down the content. So that's why we have the 5 different videos. We'll go into, with the second video, the context for org wellness, right? Why it's important. What are some contextual factors that influence what we're talking about, and some definitions that are important for us all to have kind of baseline awareness around. We'll delve into what we mean by radical self-care. How we have quite a bit of content there. So when you jump into that video, please bring journals, and we'll have some times for prompts and pausing for us to do some self-reflection there. And then, of course, for us, wellness is, we can't talk about self-care, wellness without really looking at organizational structures and systems and thinking around how we can embed this work systematically within organizations. So that's what we'll cover in video 4. And then video 5 was a kind of add-on that we did when we were developing the content, thinking, maybe someone might just have a few minutes during their day of a break, and they want to do some breathing exercise or some grounding exercises. And so that's what video 5 is for. We'll really have some coping strategies in that video that you can just plug into quickly throughout your day if you'd like to practice. And then all of this will be accompanied by a tip sheet where we'll summarize all of this content into a beautiful document that you can download and use as a resource for yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Josie. So we wanted to give you all a bit of context too around why we developed this wellness in the movement video series. So there's kind of three reasons why we developed and kind of steers our purpose in the video series. So really we wanted to offer something that could provide some foundational wellness information and resources to all of you. Including the impact of a lack of wellness in our movement, which we know is an issue and has been an issue for a long time, and it's been exacerbated by COVID and a lot of other things. But we know this is an issue, and we wanted to be able to provide this as kind of a starting point, a foundational resources that you can learn from, take from what you will, and then decide how you want to move forward with this as a foundation. We also wanted to be able to talk about both kind of an individual level of wellness, radical self-care for ourselves as individual people, as well as organizational wellness within our agencies, because we really it's much harder to be able to have the level of wellness within ourselves that we want to have if our organizations are unwell, if we don't have healthy cultures and environments in our agencies. So we want to really make sure we're addressing the strong connection between those two, and particularly for us in the domestic violence movement. And then we also just wanted to be able to offer some resources that are kind of easy, reference guides when you are, maybe you're just starting out and thinking about your wellness. Where can you begin, or where can your agency begin to start thinking about its wellness as a whole? So this is a place where you can find some resources to kind of start in that process, or maybe even to take it a step further if you're kind of already started down that road. Okay, so we know that sometimes wellness is a loaded word. People can have a lot of feelings about thinking about our wellness. Sometimes I've definitely in my own experience as an advocate and working with lots of other advocates, I know it's many times I've been like, I don't have time for that. That's just, I have to keep going. I'm so busy. There's a new crisis happening. There's no time for this. And since then have really kind of moved away from that way of thinking, and have realized how important my own wellness and our collective wellness in this movement is, after going through points of kind of breaking down because I wasn't paying attention to my wellness. Even knowing how important it was mentally, I wasn't doing what I needed to do. So we thought we'd share some of our own experiences. The three of us would share some of our own experiences about, what we've experienced and what have we learned about trying to stay well while doing the work in this movement, and being, just real about it. And hopefully, maybe you'll hear something in one of our experiences that resonates with you. Maybe you have a totally different experience, but we're just hoping that you can see we're coming at this from, with our own experiences and perspectives, and we hope you will, bring yours into it as well as you're kind of going through this series. So I'll pass it over to Josie to talk a little bit first.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So when I started the work, I started at Rape Crisis Center 20 years ago, when I was in college, as a volunteer, as a hospital advocate. I was really drawn to this field of sexual assault and domestic violence because of my own personal experience as an adult child survivor of domestic violence. I was really drawn, like so many of us, to this field to support others, right? To give back to my community because I had the lived experience. I saw and had different support throughout my lifetime. I saw how powerful that was for me personally, and was drawn to this field for that reason. I was able to mentor mentor under an amazing community psychologist, Julia Padilla out of Atlanta, Georgia, who had a grassroots community-based domestic violence organization serving immigrant Latinos in Atlanta. And so when I was able to be there and started to move into the realm of domestic violence, I really noticed a lot of my own personal triggers coming up for me, and being in a space of in a different role, right? But still having my own lived experience. That was something that until you're in it, you realize like, whoa, like I came at it from a very rational place, right? And then when I was in the room and started experiencing, honestly, trauma, I started having nightmares again, and things like that. Yeah, I was like, whoa, this is another element of work, right? Quote unquote work, that many of us didn't talk about or didn't realize that can come up for so many of us who, like me, are drawn to this field because we have lived experience. And then you layer onto that also, right? I really try to bring in the social justice framework around communities of oppression, right? So having marginalized identities and working with my community, right, and specifically the Latino community, there are those layers of trauma that come collectively, right, that can also be triggers, right, when we're doing this work. And you can also oftentimes feel just overwhelmed and drowning in oppression and trauma, right? And oftentimes I've had in my, different trajectories, points where it just felt you start to slip into that level of hopelessness, right? Because of the work that we do, especially in marginalized communities and all the intersecting forms of oppression that so many of our community members manage every day, right? And so really thinking of it in terms, I think I had to do my own unpacking because being privileged, I felt like, I have had the opportunity to have earned privilege around my education, that there was like this self-sacrifice piece that I needed to carry with me, that I couldn't take care of myself because so many of us don't have the privilege to do that, which is true, right? I come from a family of immigrants. I totally understand that. And I had to have a realization of, what it means for me to practice radical self-care, that it's actually an act of a radical act to take care of my body, to take care of my physical and spiritual self. And I am a vessel, right? I'm a healer. I do therapy. I do this work. And for order for me, it's very cliche, but it is true. In order for me to give, especially as a survivor myself, I had to, I could find myself like I would stuck. I didn't have much to give, right? And I was in those moments slipping into that hopelessness. And so for me to be able to do this work in a way that's like ethical, right? I needed to have an element of self-care and pause and a practice. It's really a practice. Some days are better than others. Some weeks are better than others, but always having an intentional practice to come back to support my nervous system and my own health. And then collectively, right? Understanding that by me taking care of myself, I also take care of those around me, including my children, my family, right? My colleagues, right? And so not try to be mindful of not recreating these stress and trauma patterns by just showing up a chaotic mess, right? Then I could trigger other people's nervous systems. But by me breaking that cycle is actually very radical in doing this work that way. And so for me, I very much resonate with the social justice framework in wellness. We'll talk in the other videos on how wellness has kind of been taken from us and capitalized, right, upon. But for me, I come back to that, to the social justice framework for how doing this type of work is very radical. And for our field, very important and ethically responsible, right? It's like we had that kind of layer of expectation for us when we do this work in this way, so that we can truly take care of ourselves, our colleagues, and the folks that we work with and partner with in the communities. So I will pass. I can't remember who goes next, if it's Molly or Jen, but Molly, I'll pass it to Molly with that.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you sharing all of that. And as a survivor myself of, intimate partner violence. The self-sacrifice piece that you mentioned, like, really resonates with me as well. And, I'd been out of the abusive relationship for over 7 years when I got into this work, and thought I was in a healed place, right? And quickly realized that things bubble up and things come up, and so the way that we really addressed, I'm speaking about like what I've experienced around my wellness as I experienced it at a family violence program when I worked in shelter. Really, it was like loosely labeled wellness, where we would do debriefing during case staffing. So that was a space where we could come and share and troubleshoot, or bounce ideas, things like that. And we'd always usually get frappuccinos, which were delicious, but all that was great. But don't get me wrong, right? But it took me a long time to acknowledge the toll of the work and how best to support my wellness. I wasn't always successful at supporting my wellness, and I would try some things for a while and then kind of fall off and then try it again. And so I feel like it's not always linear either with my wellness then and even now, but it often felt like if I were to acknowledge the toll sometimes, that I would be admitting weakness, or that I wasn't cut out for this work, or I wasn't supposed to be there. And so, being okay, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I feel like I hear that, being said a lot. And I think like the value that you bring as a survivor into this work, the value that you bring as an advocate, supporting survivors in this work is just so important, and not to be devalued. And, as it relates to wellness, for me, it's like, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be always, as strong as you want to be, or, so I think that's just important to remember for wellness, is to offer ourselves grace, and for ourselves and with others. And so, with that, and kind of what I've learned over time is that what works for me for wellness is being consistent with what supports my unique and individual wellness at that time. And like I mentioned, it can kind of change from day to day. One day it could be a 10-minute yoga class, or it could be, spending time outside, or connecting with my family and friends, cooking a new recipe, or a tried and true one, right? Like I've got the gumbo in my back pocket always, like that's comfort food. Or it could be like rocking out to loud music and lifting weights, just like getting it out. And I've recently picked back up tennis too, which is frustrating and gratifying at the same time. So, or it could be like binging a Netflix series and just laying in bed all day, because sometimes I need that. And but kind of recognizing it within myself, like being able to recognize when I need something, helping myself figure out what it is for that day and time and space, and then figuring out what brings me joy, happiness, relief. Like I said, I don't always succeed in supporting my wellness, but I have like an arsenal, or a toolbox, if you will, of things that I can pick and choose from that I know have worked in the past. But that's one thing that I just continue to work on, because in order for us to be able to show up, like and you kind of mentioned this, Josie, right, to show up for ourselves, to show up for survivors, to show up for our colleagues, to show up for our communities, in order for us for this work to be sustainable, I truly believe like wellness is one of those pieces that's essential to this work. And how do we support each other in that journey? So with that, I'll pass it over to Jen.
Oh, thank you both. I resonate with so much of what you both shared. I think the self-sacrifice piece, definitely, I know when I was working as an advocate, there were different points in my work where I knew I was burning out. I knew my wellness needed attention, but I kept just like staying in go mode, staying busy. I thought it was just part of the job to feel overwhelmed or feel upset or have things happening, that were triggering me, or that, that I was feeling stressed about, and to just keep going anyway. I worked as a shelter advocate, and then after a few years in that role, I transitioned to working as a legal advocate, thinking that a position change might help my wellness. And I'm not really sure why I thought that particular position change was going to help my wellness, because I started working with survivors who had protective order cases or custody and divorce cases, or were, victims in a criminal case, all very challenging areas to work within, for survivors to have to go through, and definitely saw a lot of re-traumatization happening within that system. And I just felt, and my symptoms of burnout and my vicarious trauma was just getting worse. I was getting angrier. It was so enraged all the time. I was having lots of nightmares. My anxiety levels were just consistently high. And I was in graduate school part-time while I was working full-time in this position. And so I knew the symptoms of burnout. I was learning, I was in social work school, was learning about all these things. And, I had known about these things for quite a while, and still I still wasn't taking care of my mental health and my wellness. And it wasn't something that, agencies that I'd worked in really prioritized. And it's not, any kind of negative criticism on them. I think it wasn't something that had really come into the movement at that point. And I think we're still working to get there, hence these videos. But I worked with amazing people who did amazing work, but it just wasn't something that was emphasized to us. So I ended up leaving my legal advocate position when I finished graduate school. And that was probably the height of my burnout. And I was really I reached a breaking point. And despite all that, it was still really difficult for me to leave, because so much of my identity was tied up in being an advocate. But if I had been able to kind of manage my wellness a bit better and do some things I needed, maybe I could have stayed longer in that role. But things being what they were, that was what was the right choice for me at that time. But I think at that point, when my symptoms were kind of at their worst, I was like, okay, it was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm leaving this job. I really need to work on myself. Went into therapy, which was a great decision, and highly recommend to anybody who's considering it. And spent some time really intentionally identifying things that support my wellness. I kind of knew certain things I enjoyed doing, but I wasn't intentionally thinking about how is this making me feel when I do this thing that I am calling self-care, or I'm calling wellness, but what's really the impact on me? And so I really learned that movement, breaks, and community were my wellness boosters. If I having some kind of movement in my day, I love to dance. I love to, I love pickleball, tennis. I like getting out running. I like hiking. I like to move, and it takes me out of my head, stops me from overthinking. I can be present in the moment. So that's a big one for me. And taking breaks during my workday, whenever I need a moment to text a funny meme to somebody, or play with my dog, or just kind of go outside and take a breath, whatever it is, giving myself permission, having been in go mode for so long and thinking I just needed to keep going and going, giving myself permission to take a break, to whatever feels good in that moment, was a big deal for me. And I think community, I had a really, really amazing community of people, and still do, who many of whom are social workers, counselors, advocates, people in this field, and who really do get it. And so talking with them is really, huge for me, a huge support, to be able to talk with people who understand some of the struggles that I'm going through, and to be able to kind of just be there, be present to each other, for me to be present for them too, and offer that support that we all really need. So yeah, so maybe, us sharing, like I said earlier, maybe something within what we shared resonates with you. Maybe you have your own unique experience. But I would encourage you to take a few minutes, to think about, what are you experiencing with your wellness now? What have you learned already? What would you like to learn? I think what Molly raised is really important. Sometimes we think of, we're weak for taking time to reflect on this, to think about it, to work on it. But it really, in the end, makes us stronger. It's affirming for us, and as Josie pointed out, it helps us to be able to do our work that we want to do. So yes, thanks for listening to our sharing, and we hope you'll do a little of your own reflection too. Okay, so I'm going to talk for a little bit about some of the wellness work that we've been doing at TCFB that has led up to these videos. There's been a lot of work over the years that different folks have contributed to on this, but I'll just talk about some of our more recent work because we wanted to work with some of you all who are staff at domestic violence, family violence programs throughout the state. We wanted to be able to hear from you. So we initiated a Wellness in the Movement Advisory Council. So it's about 10 to 15 members of staff, any staff person who working at a domestic violence center could kind of self-select into participating in this council. And really our purpose was to meet, and so we could kind of listen to each other, discuss, reflect, and also take action on wellness needs in our amongst our programs here in Texas and in our movement here in Texas, on both kind of that advocate level and that organizational level. The council decided that they wanted to know more about the wellness needs among staff and advocates working in domestic violence programs across the state. So we developed a survey, pretty brief survey to assess folks' wellness needs. And so I wanted to share some of the results of those surveys so you could see some of what we heard from folks who completed that survey, and how we're kind of building on that in this video series. So one of the questions that we asked participants to respond to was, what are the most important wellness resources and supports that you need? And we had a pretty long list of different resources that folks could rank in level of importance. So if they ranked it 1, it was the most important. I think we had 18 options. If they ranked it 18th, that was lower on the list. Not that it wasn't important, but maybe less important. So when we looked at the responses that we got, the top 3 needs, top 3 highest rated needs were having higher pay, having reflective supervision, so one-on-one time with their supervisors to really talk through challenging situations or get feedback on their work, or to work through something that was triggering to them in their work. So having that really good time with their supervisor, and the ability to take time off. So those were the top rated wellness needs. But you see here in this slide, the top 10 needs that advocates and staff rated as most important. So we also see on there things like more paid time off, better health benefits, peer support opportunities for staff, being able to process with each other and have that community, having wellness incentive programs within the agency, having counseling, preferably covered by the agency's health insurance, emotional intelligence training, and then being able to actually have time to learn about new knowledge and research in the field. So these were the things that the folks who completed the survey, what they said was most important to them to support their wellness. We also asked folks to rate what kind of wellness was most important to them. So we looked at different categories of wellness that SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, that they put out as different types of wellness that we can have in our lives. So we asked folks to rate. There were 8 different types of wellness, and these 3 rose to the top. People want to focus on their emotional wellness, their financial wellness, and their environmental wellness, what's happening around them, what's happening in their relationships and their organizations. So that was another piece that we learned in the survey. And this was really enlightening too. We asked an open-ended question for folks to just kind of type in whatever response they had. We asked them, what's your biggest obstacle to wellness? What's a barrier for you? And these 10 items that you see here were kind of the most endorsed themes. So these were kind of like the most frequently mentioned themes that we heard that were barriers to people's wellness. So we see at the very top a lack of time for themselves. We also saw a lot of folks saying they had difficulties with boundaries, whether that was their work-life boundaries or boundaries with survivors and working with survivors, being able to kind of set effective boundaries. High levels of stress and anxiety, heavy workloads, a lot of fatigue and tiredness. People mentioned that a lot. And also things like difficulties managing time, not getting paid enough, which we saw was also, one of the top wellness supports people were looking for. The effects of trauma exposure, not being able to take time off, and then working in high pressure environments and situations. And this quote here that you see on the slide from someone who is overseeing a shelter, I think highlights several of these barriers. They're saying that overseeing a 24/7 emergency shelter makes it difficult to truly take time off. I'm always available and accessible to staff and crisis needs. So this person sounds like they are not able to have a real work-life balance, to have time for themselves, lots of high levels of stress and anxiety. So we can clearly see these barriers coming out in the survey. And I'm sure you yourself think, watching this video, can think about some barriers that you've had for your own wellness, and maybe it's some of these. And then we saw some other barriers that maybe not as many people mentioned, but were still mentioned by folks who completed the survey. These were things like having a lack of emotional support and having an unhealthy work culture. I think the quote here really speaks to that. This person really, just eloquently put it in this quote, saying that the environment I work in does not provide support or a culture that promotes wellness. Individual employees are told to practice self-care, while the agency structure promotes burnout, a lack of accountability for leadership, and systemic harm to employees. So that's something we're going to get into, is that, as we've mentioned earlier in this video, and we will in future videos, that important connection between individual wellness and organizational wellness, that it's hard to be well in an environment that is unhealthy. And just some other barriers here that we're seeing, again, that we saw highlighted in the quote, difficulties with agency leadership, other things like undesirable work hours, a lack of physical activity, feeling stagnated, pressure to find resources and to be able to budget, and then understaffing. So to kind of close out this discussion about the survey outcomes, we did a listening session with some staff from programs across the state to hear. We kind of asked similar questions that you just saw in the survey there, but had kind of a more of an organic discussion with staff about what they felt was needed to move wellness forward for themselves or for their organizations. So some of the things that we heard was how important reflective supervision is. We also heard that there's a need for connection between staff working in different departments and at different levels of the agency, so not being so siloed. Also that agencies should just ask employees directly, what kind of supports do you want and need? We heard some really good experiences from staff who had decided to just ask and then found maybe that their assumptions were wrong about what employees were wanting and needing. And so then they could adjust. Also having opportunities for team building and bonding outside of work without work responsibilities, which can be really difficult when you're in a 24/7 agency and if you have shelter that you're running, but a lot of folks felt that was really important to have that opportunity. And also being able to take time off for mental health and feeling comfortable to be able to ask for that time off, people felt was essential. And then a few other things that were mentioned, staff need higher salaries. We're hearing this again and again throughout the survey, throughout other forms of feedback that TCFB has received. That probably, if you're an agency leader or if you are an advocate, I'm sure this is something that is not news to you. We also heard that leaders should check in with employees who they don't normally see during their day to kind of have a sense of what's going on, not to scrutinize, but to rather just know what's going on with folks that they don't see day to day, and to know how they can support those folks in their work. Staff need strategies. They need ways to help them separate their work from their personal life. So the agency can offer up some of those strategies. That's really helpful. Also considering cross-training between positions as a wellness strategy while being mindful of people's capacity to be able to do that. And that can help in people feeling more comfortable and being able to take time off and feeling a little more relaxed when they do take time off, knowing that somebody else is cross-trained to be able to at least do some of the work that they might normally do while they're off. And again, all considering people's capacity to be able to do this too. And embrace a people first philosophy. This is something hopefully we're doing in our work with survivors to embrace the survivor-centered philosophy, and hopefully we're doing the same with the folks who are working in the agencies that serve survivors, many of whom are survivors themselves too. So, okay, so I think I am handing. So there was a lot of talking for me, but hopefully it provided some insight into what we've heard from programs across the state and what kind of led us to this point. So I think I'm handing it over to Molly to talk through this.
Thanks so much, Jen, for laying all that out and putting it all together in such a digestible way, and sharing all your insight that you've had through the Wellness Council and your own work. So I really appreciate you doing that. So now, with the series, we'll touch on many of the areas of family violence program, many of the areas that family violence program staff have shared with us and told us are important to them and their agencies. And, as we've mentioned, this is a series. The series is a starting point for many, or a place to come for reflection on next steps, towards greater wellness. And you might be at the very beginning, like, wellness, I don't know, maybe, let me see. We encourage you to stick with us and hang out with us and view the series. And we also want to hear from you too, like, or do you see some pieces missing? Or is there something else that might resonate with you along the way that we can do better, right, to help support all our journey on the wellness journey. So, but in the series, we're going to cover more information and build a foundational knowledge and context around wellness and the definition of those terms. And you'll find out what radical self-care is if you don't know what that is. Sounds pretty cool to me when you attach the word radical to it. And then, talk more about organizational wellness and systems change, at your agency. What are some things and some ideas to incorporate or things to think about or assess at your own agency, and, practicing your own individual coping strategies and coming up and identifying maybe what some of those could be. And then, we'll send you off with a big, beautiful tip sheet with quick references to video content and a list of resources to continue to support that individual and organizational wellness that we're promoting here. But we encourage you to continue learning more after watching the videos, and consider where you may want or need additional support from us or your agency or your community. And as I mentioned, we'd love to hear from you if you have other ideas for us to consider as well. And we hope that you join us in this wellness journey together to support each other and survivors in this work, knowing that there are many survivors already in this work, doing the work, and to make it more sustainable and to bring balance and wellness into your own lives. And so we look forward to supporting each other during that. And maybe we can go, yeah, and there's our contact information. We'd love to hear from y'all along the way, initial thoughts along the way after you're done. We're always here to help support. So want to say thank y'all for joining us. And I don't know if Josie, you want to close it out?
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us, and please look forward to video 2, where we'll go over some of the context for the importance of doing this work, and the context for which we're working in, and then leave you with some definitions that we thought were important. You'll also find this content in the tip sheet. But your next step after this is to go to video 2. But you're more than welcome to jump to any of the other videos, depending on how much time you have and how you want to take in this information. But we hope you enjoy this video series. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.